Welcome to Politics and Prose here at Union Market. We're super thrilled to be here with Isaac and with Jason. I've been now totally fangirling. These guys are coming, they're going to ask me out for a drink, but I already know. Okay, I want to get personal. So my name is Wendy Wasserman. I work here in Politics and Prose. I run this program that we call Community Sales, which is actually, we run a speakers bureau out of Politics and Prose where we get some of the top authors so we can bring them into private businesses or private book talks. It's actually pretty cool. It's the best program in the secret now. But that's not the point of why we're here. I have a few housekeeping things I'm going to ask you to do. One is obviously turn off your phones. If you haven't done that, now's the right time to do that. We are going to ask that after we have this chat, when the gentlemen are finished talking, they can help us with the chairs. That way we can set up a signing line, both for Isaac and for Jason. The chairs pop up for anyone who's ever used a stroller. That's pulled up. We're to be able to find the parents in the audience there. Okay, so the book that we're talking about today is Dirtbag, Massachusetts. Isaac, today's pub day, right?
It's pub day.
I have to say, I have read it, and it's really, Isaac told me it was the most difficult thing he's ever done, but if this is difficult, I'm really impressed. So it's really quite a wonderful read, and I hope that you will pick it up. We have it on sale in the back, and like I said, Isaac will be doing signing afterwards. The New York Times called it an endearing and tattered catalog of one man's transgressions and the ways in which it are sins far more than our virtues that make us who we are. I myself think that Isaac is Popeye. Okay, but Isaac is really the first book editor for BuzzFeed, and now appears frequently on the Today Show, and is the author of several best-selling children's books, including How to Be a Pirate, and he also co-authored Pen and Ink and Knives and Ink. And his writing has appeared in the New York Times, The Guardian, The Best American Nonrequired Reading, and numerous other publications. He's originally from Massachusetts, as you know from the book, but now he lives in Brooklyn. That was a spoiler alert, by the way. Isaac is here with Jason Reynolds. He's a great friend of the store. We're always happy to have him here. He's an award-winning and #1 New York Times best-selling author. Jason's many books include Miles Morales, Spider-Man, The Long Way Down. I have to say the graphic novel literally made me cry. I was sobbing. It was really bad. And Look Both Ways, which was a National Book Award Finalist. We have several of Jason's books also up front for sale. He will also be generously doing some signing afterwards as well. He is the 2021 National Ambassador for Young Poets Literature and has appeared on The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, Late Night with Seth Meyers, and CBS This Morning. That would be late night and morning. He's on the faculty of the MFA and Creative Writing Program at Lesley University and lives here in town. So that's enough from me. We're going to have the gentlemen come out here. They're going to chat for about 40-45 minutes. Then we're going to open it up to you for questions. We're going to ask you to ask your questions here in the mic. One reason is so they can hear them, but the other reason is so we can capture them for video because we're also live streaming. So, gentlemen.
Hey, come on. All right, first things first. Give it up for everyone at Politics and Prose. Everyone at early. No, come on, come find a seat. Come find a seat.
What's up, yeah? Everybody good?
Yeah.
This is the thing about doing anything with Isaac is that he can just do it himself. There's no reason for anybody to be here. But I'm grateful to be here. We are obviously on limited time, so we're going to jump in. First of all, my brothers, good to see you. It's an honor. You know, I know Isaac, and a lot of us who know Isaac, it's interesting, right? Because you get to know a person, and then you like read their book, and then you like get to know a person, right? And sometimes that's like complicated, and then other times that makes you, sort of like love that person more, right? Like you get to know like what a person is made of, you know what I'm saying? And then you feel sort of a different kind of intimacy because you see yourself, right? And you learn things about a person that sort of help you understand them or at least admire them in different ways. I think for me, brother, Dirtbag, Massachusetts, is that, right? I think that it's a baptismal pool in certain ways. I think that there is, that what you have gone through and what you have experienced and what you think and feel, I think will be salvific for lots of people who feel like they can't say the things that you have the courage to say. And so I'm going to ask you some questions, but a lot of them are going to be rooted in some of this courage because I don't know if I have the courage. I don't know if I could have done it, honestly. Let's start from the beginning.
No, let's real quick. It's too early for you to make me cry.
Well, no,
let's acknowledge that. Sorry.
You know what? But I'm not going to take our time for granted. I think it's important, man. And what you wrote this book, we don't know. Nobody knows when it's over, right? So you better say the things you need to say to people while you have an opportunity to say them. Let's start at the beginning. I don't want to, so the book just came out today, right? So I can't really get into too much. This is the tricky part about being a person that does the thing on the day the book comes out. Is you can't really talk too much about it because I don't want to blow it for you all who are going to have the incredible experience that I had reading this book. But there is something in the beginning that I do think is worth mentioning. Could you please tell the people what the opening line of your life is and give us a little bit of context on why that is?
Absolutely. I know, I'm sorry, I'm not deflecting here, but could we just give it up one more time for Jason Reynolds being here?
I live down the street. And it's still late.
You're like, I'm in slippers. No, truly. Listen, the opening line is, my parents were married when they had me, just to different people. And that's always been an opening line that I've used for years and years and years, going back to my childhood. And that's the context, which is my parents. It's something when you learn that as a young child, that you learn that, okay, you were, and another line that I like to use was, I was a child of passion. You know, these were two people that couldn't keep themselves away from each other, and they screwed a lot of things up to make that happen, right? And so that was a source of pride, if I'm being honest. It was actually something that I was proud of in a way. It made them human, and that was something that was interesting to me. But then as you get a little older, you realize the consequences of what that meant. You understand the consequences of what those choices meant for those two adults, and you understand that there are other people, aka the families that they were a part of. And you recognize that maybe this is more complicated than you thought it was, and the way I viewed it was all of a sudden I realized maybe I was more of a bomb. I wasn't a kid, I was a bomb. And I was sent to kind of not just mess up their lives, which is, it was their actions, but also the lives of everyone around them, and those first two original families. And so I carried that for a very, very long time. Mm-hmm. That said, something my parents also gave me was a love of books and a love of literature. So at a very young age, while at the same time I'm grappling with that, maybe not even fully understanding that, I was all of a sudden was like, damn, that's a good first line. I was young, but I realized, I knew, I'm telling you, there are people in this audience right here. I went to college here, that's 18. And even that would have been years after I started using this line, but I guarantee you, there are people in this audience right now who heard me use this line, in a box. My parents were married when they had me, just different people. And it's just because it's tantalizing, it's fun. And so, that's something that I carried, I used as almost a joke and a deflection for a long time, and then I realized I wanted to get into it.
But what does it mean now, right? A first line does not make a book, right? And so perhaps you were a bomb at the beginning, right? I think my own parents, my father was bad, but my mom was very responsible. Daddy was not that guy, right? I come from that situation, tattoos and motorcycles. Mom was like, I gotta go to work every day. Dad was like, I'm a hustle. Right, and so both of them make this thing that I am, right? Do you think over the course of your life, what does it mean now, right? This child of passion, this bomb, right? This remnant of explosion, what does it mean now?
I mean, that's what I've been exploring for so long, and we're gonna ask you one or two, because I know you're working on your own, but I won't deflect that quickly. For me, it was something that I really wanted to figure out, but I didn't know for a long time. And that's what I'm gonna say, is if you asked me in my 20s, like, cause I had these literary ambitions. I always loved books, and that was a gift that was given to me by my parents. I had these literary ambitions. I knew that that's what I wanted to do, but I didn't actually know what I wanted to write. And if you asked me in my 20s, I would tell people my story, my child, and they'd be like, well, why don't you write about that?
Right.
No. That's what I'd say. Especially, I mean, I think it's something to do with that. I came up in the 90s, which was like literally like the pinnacle of like white boy memoirs and like all these different, running with scissors, I'm so sad. Like that, there was just a lot of that out there already. And I was like, that's not for me. That's not for me, I'm not gonna do that. And so for the longest time, I kind of ran away from it. I didn't want to tell this story. I knew I wanted to write, but I didn't want to tell this story. And then, real talk, I mean, not to get too much in the business side of things, I sold this book. It was a collection of essays. I literally thought I was gonna be like, I'll write about Star Wars, I'll write about some bands that I like. It'll be like disparate essays, and like every once in a while I'll be like, Ma's house was saying. But like, just touch on it, and then move on. Every time I came to that moment in those early essays that I was writing where I touched on that, I realized, wait, I gotta explain a little bit more. Oh, I gotta explain a little. Oh, I gotta explain. All of a sudden I realized, what are you doing? The thing that you're writing is actually about your childhood. The thing that you've been saying for so long you don't want to write is actually what you need to kind of face on the page, and that's where you're gonna find a story that's actually worth telling. And through that it took me a very long time to figure that out. But through that is when I realized, I had to write my editor. I'd be like, listen, I sold you this book. It's gonna be a lot different. It's gonna be a lot different. And that's when I got to work on the stuff that matters.
Yeah, for sure. What did you have any reticence? So here's the thing. I personally am terrified. People are like, oh, you should write a memoir. And I'm like, everybody gotta die first. Right? Like, as soon as everybody dies, then I'm gonna tell the story, right? But there's too many secrets and it involves too many people. Did you have any of that apprehension? I mean, there are things in this book.
Aunt Mimi, raise your hand.
Yeah.
Oh, she didn't.
She didn't even raise her hand. She
said, I ain't singing that.
No, I'm related to you.
Yeah, I ain't singing that shit out. No, well, all right, hang on. I swear, but I do want to I want to talk a little bit about your writing of your own experience and
For what?
And,
We're not celebrating one of my books.
And what you're grappling with. But I'm going to say this. That's absolutely right. I was scared. I was terrified.
Yeah.
Not only of how people would react to it, not only of how people would react to it in my own life, or maybe strangers, because that's what you're doing. You're putting a story out there that everyone then gets to take in, and they get to do with it whatever they want. They get to make it their own situation. It's the thing that I love about books, is that they are actually you get to write it, but then somebody else has to engage with it, and they're bringing their own thoughts, they're bringing their own feelings, they're bringing their own memories, they're painting their own picture in their mind, and that's like something that I love about it, but it can also be something that's terrifying. What if they get it wrong? What if they're not figuring out exactly what I'm trying to say? And then on a personal level, there's your family. And it's a line in the book. It's a line in the book that I say because I try to be very loving and very understanding to my parents. But how would you feel if 20 years from now, somebody took all of your worst actions and none of your good ones and put them in a book? I mean, that'd be horrifying. And that's what I just did to my parents. That is what this book is. And so for me, to write that, let alone publish it, was this thing that I was terrified by. But the driving force for me was, I don't put a bow on the end of this book. It's not a perfect thing. It's not, and here's the lesson that everybody learns. And it's not, hey, here's how everybody got it right. Hooray, now we all learned it all. It is literally, this is a book, not to give too much away, but that is an ongoing conversation. And so when I gave it to my mom, That's what it felt like. It didn't feel like, hey, here's my take on what happened. It felt more like, here's how this felt, but I still want to talk to you about it, and maybe we actually haven't. And that's the thing that happened that was so powerful, which is my mom's response, which is she wrote me a letter. And this isn't in the book. This is not like, this is just what has just happened over the last couple of weeks. Which is my mother wrote me a letter, and the first line was, I'm sorry. And that's something that I've been waiting to hear my entire life, and I didn't even know that. And what's wild, and maybe it speaks to her, I don't even want to say, like her skill as a writer maybe, was that then she wrote a line that made that line feel like dog shit. Which is like, fuck, like she wrote, I'm sorry, which is like, the thrill. And then the next one was, I had no idea you were carrying this. I'm about to turn 40 years old. And that line unlocked everything for me. And if she and I had had a conversation, who knows? This book maybe wouldn't exist if we had actually had the goddamn courage to talk about it. And I'm not just putting that on her, I'm talking about me. I ran away from home. I spent a decade, I didn't go home for Christmas, I didn't go home for Thanksgiving, I took off. If maybe we'd had the guts to have that conversation, maybe this book wouldn't even exist, because when she said, I had no idea you were carrying this, that's when it became clear to me. Those years were my whole life. I was a child. When you're 8, 4 years feels like forever. When you're 35, 4 years are just a bad couple of years. And that's how it felt for her. I really, truly think for her, it was like, that sucked, but it was rough, but it was fine. And then she watched as I was like, hey, she was like, he's doing fine. And so that's what gave me, I don't even want to use the word courage, but to answer your question, this book is almost like a letter to my parents. It's me trying to say, hey, hang on, we should talk about this. But instead of actually doing that, like an adult who's gone to therapy, if I started therapy, that's a whole other one. The whole book wouldn't exist. But I didn't do that until about 3 years ago. But this book basically was me trying to shout out, hey, can we talk about this?
I won't, I'm gonna hold you accountable. Because I don't think it's okay to dismiss courage. And let me explain why. I think, has anyone else written a book, by the way? Has anyone in the audience written a book? You've written a book. And just written a book, it doesn't matter if the book is in, out, just in process. Shout out to you, by the way.
Yeah.
So you know how difficult it is. And the interesting part about writing a book is that it's one of the only things you can do in terms of the arts where you have to sit with yourself. That's far more frightening than anything I've experienced on the outside of my life, on the outside of my home, on the outside of my body, right? Is that every time I go to work, I have to sit alone, and then all the voices come to the forefront. Everything, every insecurity, every arrogance, every fear, every moment of excitement, the joys, the doubts, right? It's all there, and then you somehow have to suss through your own voices to figure out which one is the healthiest one to get the job done that day, right? And you have to wrestle with that, right? And I said that to say, my friend, that like, yeah, perhaps therapy would have helped, right? But we all are in that, right? We're working it out. But I don't want to take away the courage that it takes even just to be able to, for once in your life, or once in all of our lives, to not run, to sit, to have to deal, to have to wrestle and cope, and then to put it on the page in a way that makes sense to you and to the people who might not ever meet you. And to the people who are meeting you for the first time, even though they've known you your whole life, like your mom. Right? That's a powerful and courageous thing. The other thing.
Hang on, I'm sorry, say that line again. I'm sorry, the mom.
The people who
are meeting you for the first time.
Are meeting you for the first time, but have known you your whole life. It's real. And a lot of us have experienced that, right? But that takes a tremendous amount it's so much easier to run. We have all the distractions necessary. To never have to deal with this ever, right? So, don't poo-poo on that, man. I get it. But it's a real thing to be able to do something like this. I want to talk a bit about religion. Come on. I want to talk about
I'm
it a little
damn
bit.
good at this. All right. Yeah.
Because you know, first of all, this is Isaac grew up in Massachusetts, and you know, it's almost cliche to discuss Catholicism in Massachusetts, but Isaac falls into the cliche, right? It's the whole thing is there. I too am a former Catholic. I was 12 when I told my mother I'm done. She was like, sounds good, right? My mom was super hippie dippy. She was like, great, find your own way. You know, your path is out there, right? In your experience, there's a moment that I will not spoil. That is, I've never anything like it. I never heard nothing like it. It was rattling in a lot of ways, and I won't spoil it for you. I wish this were like day 2 or 3 where we could really get into it. But I just want to talk a bit about religion, but really about the way adults and sometimes institutions fail us as children. And you know, I'm a person who loves the kids, right? Everybody knows that. As children. And just get into that a little bit. We have to dance a little bit, obviously, but.
Yeah, no, listen, I'll be open to something. Listen, y'all should buy the book. Jason already gave it a seal of approval. You should just get into it. I can spoil 1 or 2 things.
Yeah, let's spoil that.
Yeah. Which is, so, listen, I lived in an unhoused shelter. It's called Haley House. And I lived on Tremont Street, and I lived on Dartmouth. And then eventually we get to a place called John Larry House, which is basically a place that was run by the Catholic worker, which is, in my mind, the best of what the Catholic Church can be. And to use the word that I'm pretty sure, like, a lot of editors work around, but like, it was a socialist Catholic situation. It was 100% like, come here, you got problems with getting a roof over your head, no problem, we got a roof for you, but you're gonna put in some time and some work. And that became a community, and it became this beautiful situation that when I was a kid, you don't know you're living in something that's unique. I thought that's just how, like, I thought every kid just got off the bus and then hung out with like 30 adults and like got told, some of them were like, stop bothering me, understandable. And then, but a lot of the times I was just like, I learned different things about different people and different backgrounds and where they came from, and that was such an inspiring thing for me that I didn't realize affected me in the ways that did until I got older, right? So that was incredible. But through the Catholic work, my mother gets a job, and my father actually gets a job too. He starts teaching religion at a Catholic school. My mother gets a job at the Cathedral of the Holy Cross, which is the seat of Catholicism in all of New England. And there's a man that works there, Cardinal Law, and you might know him because he was on the cover of Newsweek in the early 2000s, because with Spotlight and the incredible journalists of the Boston Globe blew up the story of pedophilia and abuse that was happening in the Catholic Church. He was the guy that was playing 3-card Monty. He was never accused, I want to be clear, he was never accused of abuse himself. But he was the person that took the core tenet of Catholicism that is still to this day so important to me, which is forgiveness, which is to understand that people fail and people fall short of what we want them to be, the core tenet, but turn that into a way of basically not facing some real systemic rot that was happening in the Catholic Church, which is to say that priests that were accused or were caught in acts of abuse or pedophilia would be brought back into Boston and basically money laundered, to use a poor metaphor, and then put out to other parts of the state and or area. That's where I lived. My mom started at a very low level in the Cathedral of the Holy Cross, but because she was smart, very quickly, climb. All of a sudden, she is one of the assistants for Cardinal Law. And I'm hanging out in the rectory. I'm hanging out with these priests. And there's a moment where my half-brother from that family that was blown up that I mentioned earlier is there with me because she's trying to watch his boat. She's trying to make rent. She's trying to make it all work. So she brings us to the rectory. And we would just make up games to like get through it. And one of those games was, we called it the Half-Brother Detective Agency. I don't even know if we knew what half-brother meant. Like, we just loved the phrase. Like, it was like a brother, but more words, so it must be more important. And we were like Half-Brother Detective Agency, and a priest came along. I'm not gonna ruin the whole book for you, but just know that eventually we're in an addict. And all of a sudden another priest comes in, and And it's like, what the fuck's going on? Get the fuck out of here. Like, just live it, furious. And for the longest time, I thought that man was the asshole in that situation. As I get older, I realized that what that man was doing was recognizing what was about to happen. And he was the person that walked in to be like, get the fuck out of here. And he yelled at me. He said, Susan, this is not a place for children. And we thought he was being a dick. And so you gotta understand, I'm not gonna give you the whole book here because my mom and I then have, like we go through it. The thing is though, my parents are still devout Catholics. And I don't hate that. I love that. Because they believe in the tenets. They believe in the hope and the forgiveness and the ability to grow and be better people. The institution fucked it up. Excuse my language. I'm sorry. You seem old.
You seem older.
Guys. But the institution is still grappling with it. And what hurts is that so many people have really turned away from it now. Sorry, and you asked a question. Listen, you hit a landmine. But it's, for me, I wish more people could pick these tenets back up. But because they've lost the faith in the institution, I feel like they're still grappling with the faith of the things that the lessons that are actually taught, which my parents still hold true, and I really love and respect them for it. It's not for me too, I'm the same way. 12 years old, I was out.
I'm out there.
I was out. But I would be a liar, if I said I don't carry forgiveness in my heart, if I don't carry love in my heart. Those are real things that I think they're important.
You got the saints on your skin.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, you got the saints on your skin.
How long were you working on that one?
That
was off the top? That was
this thing is ticking a bit. But when I read that part, even then I was like, I can relate to this too. Like there are things about it that I'm completely against, and there are parts of it that I completely respect. There are questions that I'm like, all of this sounds weird. And then there are other things that I'm like, that seems pretty reasonable, right? Like, and perhaps isn't that what we're all trying to do, right? It's like, all right, I can fault a thing for the flaws that these human beings have had. They should be held accountable for what they have done. Does that mean that these people have stripped down the tenets of the institution or the history of the institution, even though the history is sordid in and of itself? But are there good things that come from that? Isn't that our parents in general?
Yeah. Or life.
Or our friends, or our schools,
Yeah.
or our government.
Yeah.
Right? Or like all the things in our lives. I mean, aren't all these things worth wrestling with? And aren't there some parts of it? There's meat to chew and there's bone to spit out.
Yeah.
At all times.
I don't want to. That's part of what I'm grappling with in the book. At one point, I'm trying to walk away from all of it.
Yeah.
I love a bar.
You do. There's a lot of that in there.
And again, there's no ribbon. I don't at any point say, and now I still love bars.
Yeah, for sure.
Clearly. But part of that for me is like looking for a place of home, looking for a place that I feel safe. We can get into all that. But for me, the reason I bring that up as you're saying that was I wanted to walk away from it all. But then life just keeps happening. You can't just ignore everything forever. Your institutions are gonna fail you. Your loved ones are gonna fail you. Your friends even are gonna fail you.
You are gonna fail.
You're gonna fail, but you can't just hide from it forever. You gotta figure out different ways to engage with the world and recognize that you're maybe more in control than you think you are.
So let's speak about engagement. Let's talk about violence. There's this quote. I'm a big Mike Tyson fan, and the evolution of Mike Tyson, as an example of all these things. The growth of Mike Tyson. If those of you who don't know, if you don't know anything about the evolution of Mike Tyson, you should tap in a little bit and see where Mike Tyson is these days. But there's something he said in that interview where he said, "Man, if only you knew the amount of violence I've had to endure to be made this sensitive." And I thought of that quote when I read this book and thought of your life and some of the things you've experienced. I want to talk about this Fight Club. So Isaac had a Fight Club, like a for real joint. And I just want to talk about I want to talk about your penchant for violence. And also like what it means, right? I think we see like, especially young men, and we I think that we're trying to understand it, but we also sort of, it's like, oh, boys will be boys. We do all these things to sort of justify violence in our lives, especially in this particular country where violence is a part of, it's a cultural element, right, for us. And I just want you to talk a bit about what was happening and looking back on it now, why? Why do you think this was something that interested you?
Okay, so first off,
Yeah.
you're brilliant. Second off, yeah, I get to ask one.
You get to ask one.
Is that at the end? How much time we got?
We got 7 minutes before we take questions.
All right, so we're gonna have, I
got
get
you.
one.
Next
All
one's
right,
yours.
my man. Okay, this is a two-part question. All right, that's not the right word. Answer. Okay. At its core, I think it was connection. That's the word. It was connection. Violence was connection. It was a way of touching and holding and being with somebody else. And that's wild.
That's why.
That's wild that instead of hugging each other or just like loving each other a little bit, what we thought was cool was to take our shirts off, all of them, never me, little body conscious, but, and beat the shit out of each other in the woods or maybe a kitchen and just get real gross and bloody together. Because maybe we didn't know how to connect in any other way. So that was part of it. The second part of the answer is, and this is from therapy. I started therapy 3 years ago. Everyone should start it sooner.
Absolutely.
But also no judgment, it'll come to you in time, no shoulds. Anyhow, that's therapy too. Anyhow, it was my therapist that pointed out, because I told these stories, the stories that you're gonna find in this book, I told these, of course, in therapy. And it was my therapist who said to me, do you recognize that the church and home, places that were supposed to be very safe, for you were not? And then places like bars and your fight clubs. And there's an essay we're not gonna get into.
Absolutely not.
Amen. The armory were places that felt like you wouldn't get that connection. Yet that's where you found community. That's where you found home. That's where you found safety. That's where you found people that would actually connect with you. And of course I was like, what? But when she said that, and her name, shout out Dr. Jenny Kaufman, when she said that, I did recognize that this whole essay collection is about home. And it's about how I'm trying to find these spaces and these places where people are going to give me that. But the next thing because that's a nice little present. That's a nice little, because what she said was, you realize why you're sneaking, why you were seeking out these dangerous situations was because danger felt like home. Because you lived in a violent space. So yes, you actually did find real community there. The reason you sought those places out were because you were looking for that anxiety. You were looking for that tension. And so violence, for me, was not just a way to connect with people. It was literally a way to try and find what felt like I thought should be a safe space. And it took me a very long time to untangle that. And again, that's not something I've actually done. It's something I'm still working towards this day.
You want to ask your question?
Thank you. Can I?
You can ask your question.
Okay.
You can ask your question.
Hi, Jason. I love you. Thank you for these. You were so in depth. That was incredible. Come on, let's give it up for Jason. You are a brilliant writer, and you have written so many books that mean so much to so many people, myself included. You then take that, you go on, one of the things at the core of this book for me is storytelling as a way of like shaping your life, structuring your life, maybe even saving your life. That is something you deeply believe in, and it shines, it shows in all of your work. And now you are working on your own story. You are working on your own memoir. Yes. Props.
No one's ever gonna, it's never gonna come out.
No! We solved this now! So, oh, I'm so sorry. What, for you, is the difference? What are you running into that feels different? Because I'm sorry, I'm gonna project a little bit. Jason, you've told your own story 100 times. You keep telling, you're so good at it. It's fictional.
Yeah, exactly.
What are you running into with nonfiction?
I think memory is interesting, complicated. And my memories are my memories, but there are real people attached to those memories whom I love dearly. And so even though I remember a thing a particular way, it paints people in ways that might not necessarily be true. It's just my memory of it. And those people I just care too much for at this particular juncture to put them in the crosshair like that. And I could change their names. I could. Well, we talk about my mom. We talk about my father. God bless the dead, right? This man isn't even alive, and I don't think I'm willing to. I think I'm a little. It's a little tender for me at the moment. Look, one of these days it'll be. I'll do it. I'll do it. But I don't necessarily feel any urgency for it. I'm just working on it because it's something that feels good for me. It's cathartic to work through. And I got other things to work on anyway, right? But at some point it will exist in the world, and people will read that. But the truth is, I don't owe nobody that story.
That's right.
That's mine.
No, that's
and if I
absolutely
want to give it up, if I want to share it, and be as bold as you have been, my friend, I will. But I don't feel any push to do that because I think there's an awful lot of spotlight on me, and I think when the spotlight dies down, then I'll slide it on.
Yeah, listen, I didn't think this book was
exactly, and here we are, right? And
mumble. But no, but listen, I accept that, I love that, but can I say one thing back to it?
Please do.
And this is just like all feedback, just like an edit, just like anything else. Pick up what's helpful, leave the rest. I ain't trying to tell you shit. Stuff. Your people will surprise you. Your people will surprise you. Because they might remember it differently. And they might have their own out. There are people in this room, and I'm not just talking about my mom. There are many people in this. There's a whole part of this book we haven't even talked about. There are people in this room who remember things differently than I do. But I think they believe in the project. They believe in the love. They believe in the message behind it. That they make room for the way that I do remember them. Just like you remember things differently than your people maybe remember them, they recognize that you might remember it differently than they do. And they make space for that. I feel very lucky that my mother reacted the way that she reacted to this. But we didn't even talk about my father. And he wrote me a letter too. And it was much more delightful and jokey. He said, I don't know what to tell you, childhoods are tough. Mine was too. And he said, I probably shouldn't have given you so much Bukowski to read at such a young age. Which was true. But then he said, I love you, and I'll see you at Thanksgiving. You know, he's not saying I accept all of this, but he's just saying this conversation's still there. And I get it, you do. You have a giant spotlight on you, and there is no rush, and you can do whatever the hell you want, whenever the hell you want. But I really do believe that if you were to write your own story down, you would be surprised by the people that you are worried about offending. That's it.
You'll be the first to read it, my friend. I'll send it to you first. We have.
Come on, Jason Reynolds, you can clap now.
I'm going to take some questions. If you don't have questions, I got hella questions. But so please have questions. But if you don't, I got a couple.
Hey, Isaac.
Hi, beautiful.
Nice to see
He
you.
calls everybody beautiful. Huh?
All right, Jason! Don't call me out like that.
Hi. Thanks for not spoiling the chapters about me. I look forward to reading
It's like 7 of them.
I was really surprised to hear that this started as a collection of essays and then became what it was, because I think for a lot of us, we would see writing about Star Wars and bands as the fun stuff, and the personal side is almost obligatory.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering for you whether that change was driven by the writer side of you that realized this is more powerful, this is the better book that I can write, or whether it was driven as a sort of act of therapy, as you deciding you needed to unpack this for you.
Yeah, I think that's, first off, absolutely tremendous question, because the answer is in a way, it's kind of both, which is, it was me working through my own issues, 100%, I don't want to turn away from that. But also what it was me wanting to write the most interesting book that I could, and that's what was happening. Don't get me wrong, I bet you, I hope I do. I can still write a hell of an essay about like fathers and sons and Star Wars. I think that's there, and I can do it. But guess what? There's a lot of those essays already in the world. And that's not to say, don't get me wrong, everybody's story is unique. You shouldn't live in fear of retelling a story that's already been told. You should definitely put your own thing out there. But for me, what happened was I kept getting further and further away from Star Wars and more about what are all these things I haven't examined with my father. And that's when the book started to change. That's when I realized, you know what am I doing here? I'm actually using pop culture as a shield, almost like a submarine, to like kind of go down into some of my stuff, but not actually really get into it and touch on it just a little bit. And that's going to make for a less honest collection. Like that's what it came down for. So then when I was just like, hang on, what does a father-son essay look like if I just take Star Wars out of this? It became a lot more powerful. Because that's the other thing that I get asked a lot, which is that people are like, oh, you did this, you did this, you did this, you did, none of that's in here, what's up with that? Like, nobody needs to read an essay about like, here's some good things that like, no offense, like, some of those essays I'm sure are fine, but like for me that's boring. Like I knew for a fact what a reader was gonna be engaged with was the emotional things that I was figuring out while I was starting to explore this on the page. So anytime I started to be fired up about it, that's when I realized, like, for many, many years, that was when I was like, okay, that's too much. And it's when I leaned into that I realized, wait, this can actually be a much better book than I think it was. Because that's the thing, I truly was like, there's a little book deal, I'm gonna take this little money and I'm gonna write like a little B- book, this will be great. Instead, it's D+. All right, nah.
Anybody else? Uh-oh.
Hello, stranger that I've never met in my entire life.
Isaac, how did I miss the Fight Club era? When was that?
The question was, how did she miss the Fight Club era? When was that?
So that would have been at, I'm gonna be very careful here, although he said he's fine, but in the book, his name is Connor, but is a best friend growing up when I was in Peterson. No, I liked it. I'm sorry, real quick, somebody just pointed. It was not Timmy Persico. But that was at, I'll just use real names, it's fine. That was at Liam's house. So Liam was my best friend growing up, and I love him very much. And we have taken very different paths in life, and we are still very much in touch, and we love each other very much. Which is to say that he now commands thousands and thousands of young men in the Army. And I dream and write about my childhood. But at the time, I was living in this drafty gray farmhouse. He lived in a house that made my house look like goddamn McMansion, goddarn McMansion. And the way I describe it in the book is almost like an Ewok village, which is up on stilts. And so Liam and I met when we were 12. The movie Fight Club, I believe, comes out when we're maybe 14. And it just captured our imagination. And again, I think it related to all those things. His father had died right before we met. I was having these issues at my own home. And so slowly, we started to build this group of boys who would get together and fight, which then turned into multiple groups, which then turned into, I was at another place and I was doing it there too. But what made it possible was that Liam's mother was filled with love. I really believe that. She was filled with love for us. But she was always there, but never told us what to do. Which is to say, she would go to bed around 5 p.m. And so we really ran that little Ewok village house on our own. And then I don't think this is even in the book, but this is weird. Like, look, ego's weird, being a person's weird. Like, I'm just gonna put this little joke on the end of it, which is true. Like, we then stopped, but we heard that there were other ones still going on. And we like took a deep pride in that. We're just like, all right, listen, I'm not a perfect person. It was at a rod and gun club. How did they get the keys?
Yeah, when I read that chapter, in my mind I was like, oh, I grew up, and at first I was like, oh, I grew up playing fighting with my friends, and I realized, this like fighting. Now like closed fists.
That's what we wanted.
That's not what I want. Somebody punched me in the face. I was like, yeah, this is. I was laughing. I was talking. You remember Aaron?
Yeah.
I was laughing with Aaron. I was like, bro, I'm reading this book, reading Isaac's book. We always thought this is the way white boys grew up. And you were absolutely right the whole time.
That's what Saeed said. He was like, I knew you. I knew it. Crazy.
I always wondered. Any other questions?
There's other part that we won't get into that. Anyways, sorry, what?
I actually have a question. So, ever since I saw the book, why the word dirtbag?
Great question. Great place to stop it. Which is that? No, are we close?
I got another question. You don't call the shots here.
Wait, hang on. But can I barter? I can get one more out of you.
We can do one of them.
All right.
We can do one of them.
Wonderful question. Which is to say, so I grew up in South End, Boston, and I lived, like I said, Haley House, John Larry House. I lived in this Catholic worker situation. But at the age of 8, again, this is early in the book, so I'm not giving too much away. My childhood, which was very impoverished, very inner city, those were the happiest years of my life. It's when I moved out to the country, and the poverty that we had followed us, and we were city poor, and all of a sudden we were country poor. That's when things really took a turn, and that's when my parents, all the issues that they had, which they definitely had still in the cities, but they really came to the forefront. So we were bouncing around that area. Eventually, we ended up in a town called Athol, Massachusetts. That's right. I love your eyes got as big as plates, and that's absolutely right. It's a silly town name. I'm sorry, it's a silly name for a town. It is from Scotland. Respect, God bless. If anybody's watching from Athol, Scotland, my bad. I didn't mean to mess with the Earl of Athol, but it's a ridiculous name for a town. And of course, everybody in Massachusetts, which there's a long line of masshole. We like to play with the names up there. Anyways, of course, everyone called us asshole Massachusetts. We had the highest teenage pregnancy rate per capita in the state, and it was an interesting place to grow up because Massachusetts itself is actually a very rich state. So that's part of what this book is about as well, growing up low income, but in a very wealthy state, which is to say there's a difference between growing up in a state like that or low income in a state that is also low income, right? We were bumping right up against these different class situations. But everyone called it asshole Massachusetts or rat hole Massachusetts. But when I sold that first collection that I've been talking about, that it then changed, I was saying to my buddy Jason Diamond, who's a wonderful writer. Jason Diamond, fantastic. And I just said, well, you can't call a book asshole Massachusetts. And without missing a beat, and this is true, maybe one of the better things about this book is the title. It's a good title. And it didn't come from me. Jason he was driving. We were literally, I'm sorry you think I'm making it up, but I'm not. We were literally going to Boston. We were gonna stay in a motel in the shadow of Fenway Park, and he was doing an event there for his book at the time, which was called Searching for John Hughes. And anyhow, he just was driving and he just was like, what about Dirtbag, Massachusetts? And I was just like, well, there it is. and to connect it to the first question in a way, I was like, well, I gotta write a better book now, because that's a really good title. But that's where it came from.
We're sure that's questions. I'm gonna end with mine. for sure.
Okay, oh, that's,
Because I ask everybody the same one, so you're a part of
all
the
right,
wrong line.
all right, and I appreciate that. So Jason, again, of course I want to ask, there's so many different things that you do and the ways that you champion books, and the ways that you talk to young people that are so important to me. But I kind of want to be a bee in your bonnet about the nonfiction, and I apologize for that. If you were to start to think, hey, maybe I could do this, would you show it to the people piece by piece? Would you try to get it all done and then show it to them? Or would you let it be published and then, and truly, I don't think there's a wrong answer to this.
There's not, but there is for my process. So I would just write the book.
Yeah.
I just believe in freedom, and if I'm going to do it, but that's the thing, if I'm going to do it, but that's the thing, right? If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, right? All in, and then I'll, I don't really ask for permission to about nothing in my life, at all.
Yeah.
Except for when it comes to consent. But other than that, I pretty much do what I want to do, especially when it comes to this work, this art. And so I would write the book, and then I would go to my folks, my mom, my stepmom, and just be like, look, here are the things that I'm discussing. Do you want to see? And my mom, she'd be like, man, you know what I mean?
That's what my mom was saying.
I love you. Take care of me, but also tell your truth, right? I know that's what she'd say. But it's that same love that I have for her that allows that causes me to be empathetic enough to be reticent, right, and to be considerate. So it's a tricky push pull, but I would write the whole book and then ask.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. No, come on. Quick follow up. This is it. I promise.
All right.
Would you ever write the whole thing and then just keep it in the drawer?
Absolutely. There's a lot of books in the drawer of mine.
Yeah.
A lot of books that nobody will read that I've written over the years. I mean, I write because I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. It isn't just commerce for me, man. I got lucky on that front. But this is the way that I relate and connect and work out my life. This is the way that I see the world, and the way that I cope with the world, and the way that I process and synthesize the information of my own life and the lives around me, right? I got lucky and ended up sort of creating a lifestyle from it, a livelihood from it. But I'm a person who just believes in the alchemy of language.
Yeah.
That is my religion,
Yeah.
right? My last question to you, my friend, is a question I've asked a gazillion people that we respect, the James McBrides of the world, to the, I think I've asked Roxanne, everybody has gotten this question.
To the people you don't respect, right now.
You're not gonna let me.
Come on, it's a joke.
I don't talk to people I don't respect.
All right. All right. God damn it.
Here's the question. Go back to your 10-year-old self. Right? 10-year-old Isaac. Now, there's an obvious cliche that comes out of the next part of this question that I'm not going to ask, that everybody else asks, which is what would you tell your 10-year-old self looking back now? It's not the question. The question is, what would you thank your 10-year-old self for?
Oh. Frustrating. I mean, to be honest, a lot. I'm going to be real honest.
Please.
A lot. But I'm going to try and break it down to two things for right now. Which is one, I would say to my 10-year-old self, which, yikes, would be 29. I'd say thank you for saying yes. Thank you for saying yes. My 29-year-old self at that point had said yes to so many things, had gone on so many adventures, had made so many wild, ambitious, ridiculous choices that I know came from maybe not the healthiest place. I know that I was in a way playing dice with my own life a lot of the time. But that was part of the journey for me. So where I'm at now, I feel so grateful for the choices that person made, because those are the things that basically became the building blocks of who I am today. And so I would say thank you for that. And then the other thing I would say, which is also a form of gratitude, is thank you for not writing the book yet.
You at 10.
Yeah. Yo, did you say 10?
Not you at 29.
No, I'm sorry. I thought you said 10 years ago.
Nah, you're a 10-year-old.
Oh, sorry, God, I messed up.
I was gonna say, you really were a genius. If you
No, I messed the question up. All right, well, listen, I'm gonna finish the 29-year-old.
Of course, of course.
But I would say this book would have been so different if I wrote it at 25 than writing it now. It would have been angry. It would have been filled with rage. There would have been no forgiveness or acceptance of my family at all, or my parents. And so I'm glad that that person did write the book. I'm sorry, I heard 10 years ago. 10 years old? What would I say?
What would you think your 10-year-old self for?
I think when I was 10 years old, I know. When I was 10 years old, it was about when things were maybe the toughest.
Yeah.
8, up to 8th grade, 12 on, I'm messing up, my parents are getting better. 10's kind of the thick of it. So it's real basic. And I'm not trying to be overly dramatic. But around that age is when I was aware that I was conscious, that I was alive, that there was such a thing where one could not be bad as one. And it was something I thought about a lot. And I'm really glad, like phenomenally, because I love life so much, and every day feels like a blessing now. So, the thing I thank my 10-year-old self for, and it feels very basic, but it's just for getting through it, and for deciding to stick with it. We all know what I'm saying right now. Because there were a lot of reasons, and there was a lot of feelings in my own heart for why I shouldn't. And I didn't think I was worth, actually, being around. That's at the core of this book. I thought because I was a mistake, that inherently meant that I was a troublemaker, inherently meant that I was causing mischief just by existing. And there's a real easy solution to that. And I was a very young age to be thinking things like that. But I'm really grateful that that kid stuck around.
Before we go, and I ask you all to clap for Isaac, I will, and I always say this too, I do, everybody should think about that. There's a weird thing that happens between 10 and 12. Everyone I've ever asked that question says that that's when it got thick. It's a weird thing that happens to kids around that age. And I would ask you all to ask yourself what you're grateful for with that part of yourself, because that's still mature. Like the majority of who you are today is still the success story of the 10-year-old self, right? It's the most human part of who we are, and so like it's an interesting thing to consider. And my brother, I want to say that what you have written, though it is your testament, it's a human story. It's the story of who we actually are, right? Yeah, the details are yours, right? The details are yours, but this is our story, right? Worth, value, danger, violence, forgiveness, joy, pain, disappointment, right? Poverty, comparison, right? All of these things are what we deal with on a daily basis. So I appreciate your contribution to the human story. I appreciate your contribution as a literary citizen for all of us. I've benefited from your ambassadorship, my friend. I'm grateful for that over the years. Many of us are. And also just for your heart, man. I think a lot of us who know you know that, right? We're grateful for your heart. So thank you for sharing some time with me. Yeah, give it up. Jason Reynolds.